Have you ever said a word in Chinese and the other person looked confused? You repeat it, they still don't understand. And you start thinking, did I say the wrong word or just the wrong tone? For a lot of beginners, that's the exact moment when Chinese starts to feel intimidating. You might be thinking, okay, I can learn vocabulary, I can learn grammar, but tones, what am I supposed to do with that? And then usually people try to connect it to something familiar. They think, maybe tones are like stress in English. You know, like how we say certain syllables louder or stronger. But Chinese tones are not the same as English stress. And if you misunderstand this from the very beginning, Chinese can quickly start to feel confusing and frustrating. So today, I want to clear that up. I'm going to explain what Chinese tones really are in the simplest way possible. So let's start with the most important idea. What is a tone? A tone is simply a change in pitch. It's about how high or how low your voice goes when you say a syllable. It's not about being louder and it's not about emotion. It's purely about pitch, the musical level of your voice. In Chinese, tones are changes in pitch, almost like musical notes. When you speak, your tone might stay high and steady, it might rise, it might fall, or it might dip and then rise again. Maybe it helps to think about singing. When you sing, you don't just stay at one flat sound. Your voice moves up and down in different notes. Chinese works in a similar way, except instead of singing a song, you are speaking words, and each word has its own specific pitch pattern. Chinese tones use these kinds of pitch movements in a very precise way. Instead of being random or emotional, each syllable has a specific pitch pattern that stays consistent. You can even imagine it visually. Think of it like drawing a line in the air with your voice. Sometimes the line stays high and flat, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, and sometimes it curves. When you speak Chinese, you are not just saying a sound, you are drawing a little pitch shape in the air. And once you start thinking about tones as pitch movement instead of stress or volume, everything begins to make a lot more sense. Now, here is something important, especially if you're an English speaker. Tones are not stress. In English, we use stress all the time. Some syllables are stronger, louder, or a little longer than others. Stress in English helps a word sound natural. If you stress the wrong syllable, it might sound a little strange, but people will usually still understand you. Chinese works differently. In Chinese, every syllable has a tone, and that tone is part of the word itself. If you change the tone, you change the meaning. So in English, stress makes a word sound more natural. In Chinese, tone changes the meaning completely. Let's take the classic example, the sound ma. Now listen to what happens when we change the tone. If you say ma with a high, steady tone, it means mother. If you say ma with a rising tone, it means something totally different. If you say ma with a dipping tone, it means horse. And if you say ma with a sharp falling tone, it means to scold. Now, just to clarify, the spelling you are seeing here is written in pinyin. Pinyin is a phonetic system that uses the Roman alphabet to help people read and pronounce Mandarin Chinese without knowing the characters yet. So even though it looks like English letters, it represents Mandarin sounds. Notice what's happening here. It's the same spelling in pinyin. The only thing that changes is the pitch. And when the pitch changes, the meaning changes. That's how powerful tones are. They are not optional, they are built into the word itself. And that's a completely different system from English. So what are these four tones exactly? Let's take a look at them. Don't worry, I'm going to keep this simple. You don't need to memorize anything complicated right now. You just need to understand the general feeling of each one. Let's start with the first tone. The first tone is high and flat. Your voice stays up and steady. It doesn't move. It's almost like you're holding a musical note. Imagine you are singing one clear high sound and just keeping it there. That steady level sound is the first tone. Now, the second tone is rising. Your voice starts a little lower and then goes up. It's similar to how your voice rises when you ask a question in English. Think about the way you say, really, when you are surprised. Your voice naturally goes up at the end. That upward movement is the second tone. The third tone is a little different. It falls and then rises, like you are thinking or hesitating. You can think of it as a deepened sound. It goes down first and then it comes back up. A simple way to feel it is to imagine you are slightly confused and you say, Your voice kind of dips and then lifts. That shape down and then up is the third tone. For now, just remember the general curve. And finally, the fourth tone is sharp and falling. Your voice starts high and then just drops quickly and strongly. It feels firm, almost like you are given a command. Think about how you say no when you are being very clear and decisive. Your voice comes down sharply. That strong falling movement is the fourth tone. So if you step back and look at all four tones together, you can almost see them as simple shapes. One stays high and flat, one rises, one dips and rises, and one falls sharply. When you start thinking of tones as these simple pitch shapes, they begin to feel much more concrete and much less mysterious. In pinyin, tones are shown with tone marks. The tone marks actually help you see the pitch shape visually. You'll notice a small symbol reading above the main vowel, like in ma, 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 ma. That little line or curve on top tells you the pitch pattern of that syllable. It's also important to mention that Mandarin has something called the neutral tone. Now, technically, it's not counted as a fifth tone in the same way as the other four. It doesn't have its own fixed pitch pattern like high, rising, dipping, or falling. Instead, it's considered a light syllable. It means the syllable is shorter, softer, and less emphasized. So while we focus mainly on the four main tones, it's good to know that Mandarin also has this lighter, unstressed neutral tone. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I understand the idea, but this still feels hard. And that's completely normal. Tones feel difficult for a simple reason. English is a stress-based language. That means your brain is used to listening for which syllable is stronger or louder. Chinese, on the other hand, is pitch-based. That means meaning depends on high and low sound movement. Your brain has been trained your entire life to pay attention to stress patterns, rhythm, and word order. It has not been trained to carefully notice small differences in pitch on every single syllable. So when you start learning Chinese, your ears are not used to listening in this way, and those differences can feel blurry. Two tones might sound almost the same to you, even though to a native speaker, they are completely different. And the problem here lies not in your memory, it's your ear. Most beginners think, I just need to memorize the tones better. But tones are not just information you memorize. They are a listening issue. They are sound patterns your brain needs to recognize automatically. If your ear cannot clearly hear the difference between a rising tone and a falling tone, your mouth will struggle to produce it correctly. That's why the real starting point is listening. Before you can consistently speak tones correctly, you have to train your ears to hear them clearly. Once your ear becomes sensitive to pitch movement, everything starts to improve. Your pronunciation, your confidence, even your comprehension. So it's important to focus on building that listening awareness. And instead of blaming yourself or thinking you are bad at languages, you should understand what's really happening. You're building a new sound system in your brain, and like any new system, it just needs time and the right kind of training. Now let's talk about a very common beginner mistake. When people start learning Chinese, they usually focus on memorizing vocabulary. They make flashcards, practice characters, and study grammar patterns. And all of that is great. Those things are important. But at the same time, many learners quietly ignore tone listening. They look at the pinyin, they kind of notice the tone mark, and then move on. They assume it's a small detail they can fix later. The problem is tones are not a small detail. If you ignore tones, people may not understand you, even if your grammar is perfect. You could build a beautiful sentence, use the right word order, choose the correct vocabulary, and still confuse someone because the pitch was wrong. Let's go back to our simple example. If you say ma, you are saying mother. If you say ma, you are saying horse. Same letters and same spelling in pinyin, but they have completely different meanings. So imagine you are trying to say, "This is my mother," and instead, because of the tone, it sounds like you are saying, "This is my horse." That's a very different situation. It sounds funny, and sometimes it is, but it also shows how important tones really are. They are not optional, they carry meaning. So if you want people to understand you clearly, tones can't be something you skip. They have to be part of the word from the very beginning. Tones might feel very hard right now, but the truth is, they are just different. They feel challenging at the beginning because your brain and your ears are doing something new. And whenever we ask our brain to work in a new way, it feels uncomfortable at first. But different doesn't mean impossible. Learning tones is really a combination of two things. First, it's ear training. Your ears need time to notice the pitch clearly. You need to train yourself to hear the difference between a high, steady sound, a rising sound, a dipping sound, and a falling sound. At the beginning, those differences might feel confusing. But the more you listen carefully and consistently, the more your brain starts to separate those sounds automatically. What feels blurry at first gradually becomes sharp and clear. Second, it's muscle training. Your voice needs to practice producing those new pitch patterns. Your vocal muscles need repetition. Just like learning a new sport or learning to play a musical instrument, it might feel awkward and unnatural in the beginning. You might feel like you're exaggerating. That's normal. Over time, your muscles adapt and your voice becomes more flexible and controlled. The most encouraging part is that this kind of improvement can happen faster than you think. You don't need hours every day. Even short, focused daily practice can make a real difference. A few minutes of careful listening and a few minutes of slow, intentional repetition. That kind of consistency builds real progress. So if tones have been scaring you, or if you've been telling yourself this is too hard, I want you to gently shift that mindset. Think of tones as a new skill, and like any skill, with the right practice and enough time, they become more natural. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you learned something about Chinese tones. If you've been feeling confused about tones or maybe even avoiding them a little bit, I hope this gave you some clarity and confidence. From here, the next step isn't to panic and try to perfect all 4 tones immediately. The next step is just awareness. Start noticing pitch when you listen to Chinese. Pay attention to how the voice moves. This awareness alone is powerful. If this information helped you, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video. And in the comments, I'd love to hear from you what has been the hardest part about tones so far. Is it hearing them clearly, pronouncing them correctly, or just understanding how they work? Thanks for learning with me, and I'll see you in the next video.